It's definitely getting warm out here in the garage, so switching over to cold brew instead of hot coffee. But for today's video, I thought I would take you along the journey of a job that I got. It's relatively simple, but it changed on me. Originally, I was told that this job is going to be pulling pins out, and I thought, sweet, I just picked up a tool that I think everybody should have in their shop, and this would be a great opportunity for me to show it off. And here it is. Nice slide hammer. And I got this off of weldmongerstore.com, and it's not an ad, it's not a plug, just telling you where I got it. This is a strong hand slide pull hammer, and you can make these on your own. You can do anything, as long as you can even get them at Harbor Freight. They make one where you basically just replace this back threaded bolt and it turns it into a slide hammer. They're okay. I don't know. I like this one because it pulls off of the center axis of the actual jaws. So that's really nice, and a lot of people will actually weld the slide pull onto the vice grip, and that's okay too. I mean, there's a million ways of doing this, but this is one that is ready to go out of the box. And I thought, sweet. So I picked this up about a month ago, and I've always wanted to have a slide hammer here at my home shop because I used it at my last job and several other jobs quite often. So they do come in handy, and if you're running your own shop at home, you never know what you're going to get. You never know what type of jobs a machine shop might call and say, hey, you know, we broke off some pins, or we've got some pressed in pins that we need to have removed. Can you do it? And it just makes it so much easier to say, yep, absolutely, let's do it. They don't need to see how you do it because it's relatively simple. So, like I said, when I got a call saying I got some pins to pull, I was like, let's do it. So with this job that came in, it said I had to pull this pin out. But if you look really closely at this pin, you'll see that the actual pin is threaded in. So definitely not going to be pulling this. I'm going to be turning it. But it's still a job. Still thought I would bring you guys along the journey on this one, and let's do it. Now to do this job, we're going to use a couple pretty simple tools, and we're going to use 309L filler wire to get these threaded pins out. I was really looking forward to using that slide hammer, but job's a job, and that's what came in, so we'll just go ahead and do it. So like I said, we're going to use a couple really simple tools, just a basic vise and channel locks. Let's do it. Now another little hack that seems stupid obvious when you're dealing with these simple vices like this is grind the paint off the back. Now, I know that seems really stupid, but I'll be honest and say it took me a long time to grind that off. I don't know why, I just didn't do it, and I'm really glad I did, because now it actually grounds to the table instead of sparks all over the place finding a ground. So just do yourself a favor, grind off the paint on the back so you get a nice ground and you don't have to worry about it. Let's get these machines on and get the pins out. And again, we're using 309L for this. And I thought about using Hastelloy W, but this job isn't paying very much at all. Just basically a couple dollars a piece. So it's not really worth it to use a really expensive filler wire unless I have an issue with it. But I don't think I will. I think the 309 will work just fine. But never know. I thought there was going to be pins to be pulled out of it, so who knows? We might be pulling out the Hastelloy W anyways, so let's see what happens. Well, that took forever. It's funny how long it takes to shoot little B-roll videos like that, but it's fun. I've got my machine set at about 100 amps and the gas flow is set to about 25 or 30, and that's usually the typical gas flow that I like to use for a FUPA 12 cup. And anything on DC, I'm generally using a FUPA 12, or I've been starting to use the Jazzy 10, and I like it. Especially if you got to get into some smaller areas and everything like that, but in general my go-to size cup is the FUPA 12 for DC, and of course you know my number 5 cup for aluminum always, 98% of the time. This is going to be a relatively simple setup. No reason to get super fancy with it or anything. Like I said before, this job isn't paying very much, so all we got to do is get this threaded pin out, and that's it. There's 14 of these to do, so let's get going. In a nutshell, basically what we're doing is we're being very careful to just strike an arc on the actual screw itself, or set screw, and just building up a blob of 309 filler wire on the end, and then we lock down onto that blob and just back the screw out. Simple as that. One of the tricks to this too is as soon as you're done welding on it, you gotta get on it and get that pin out while it's nice and hot. And it should just back right out if you get a good grip on it. Of course, this is the one that won't. There we go, I got it. Just a little bit on the awkward angle. Now, one of the things that's really important when you're doing something like this to get out a thread or a bolt or even a pin that you're going to pull is as you're filling in the filler wire, you want to continuously fill it in, but you want to rise up the tungsten as you're filling in the filler wire. You want to rise that puddle up, because if you just sit there, it's just going to get further out, and you don't want to go out, you want to go up. So you've got something to grab onto with your channel locks. I know this one was a pretty basic skills, but it's a really important thing to know how to do, because a lot of machine shops will shear off pins, shear off bolts, do different things like that, or friends will shear off a bolt head, and having a couple pounds of 309 can really save the day. And I didn't have to get out the Hastelloy W, so that is always really nice, because this job, they're only a couple dollars a piece, so it really doesn't justify pulling out the more expensive filler wire. So I've got about 10 more of these to do, so I'm going to go ahead and make some B-roll shots of this and finish up the job. So have a great one. Hold on a minute. I was looking at this last one and there's no bolts on the sides, and the arrow's pointing to the pin in here, so I do get to pull a pin with the slide hammer. Now the only difference between taking the threaded bolt out of the side and now pulling this little pin out of here is the extraction. I'll do the same exact thing by building up a blob on the end of this, clamping that channel lock to it, but instead of twisting it out, you just yank it. I'm looking at this one now too. It's pretty dirty, nasty in here, so I'm gonna just do a little acetone wiping and some wire brushing on this thing. With the side ones, I didn't really have to do a whole lot of cleaning to them because there's enough space on the face of where it sheared off that it was okay, and really all the oils, and it looked like there was some anti-seize or Loctite or something on the inside that burned out. So even if I did acetone wipe it, it really wouldn't have done a whole lot to them. So I've gone through a few pieces of tungsten on this from all that stuff just burning off and jumping up onto it. But again, like for this one, this little tiny pin, I'm going to want to clean that up so I don't jump over onto the actual part. That's a little bit better. I like that. I know I didn't get all the way down in there, but hopefully that's enough. And again, I'm doing the exact same thing as I did with the other pins, just building up a blob on the end and pulling it out. And remember, you want to rise up the tungsten as you rise up that filler wire so that it doesn't go out. You want it to go up. Now the interesting part is, how do you hold that little thing so you can yank that pin out? I think I got an idea. Now the best way to pull a pin or pull something out is if you can get a sideways pull, you can get more force to it. If you're pulling up, it'll work, but if you have to do a lot of them, your shoulders are going to hurt. Or if you can pull it down, that's even better. So with this one being so small, I was thinking to myself, like, I'd like to lock it down to the table, but I don't want to have to yank up because my table is pretty high. So with this being a fixture table, let's mount it to the side. That should work. Alright, for this we just want to clamp this on here and get it on good and tight and just pull it out. And hopefully it's not threaded, because if it is, well, that's going to be a problem. Sometimes you just have to trust the customer, and I looked at it really close and I didn't see any threads on it, where the other ones you could actually see that top thread going in. So this one I'm pretty sure is an actual pin, so let's lock it on. Here we go. Ah! It broke off. So, put another blob on there. Honestly, sometimes when you're pulling pins out, there's a lot of rinse, lather, repeats, because you'll put that blob on there, you'll yank it, and it'll just break off, which is what happened with this one. So, you know, just put another blob on and give it another yank. Round two. Oh. That one just fell off. I think it's time to get the Hastelloy W out. Hey, you know what they say, when in doubt, get the W out. I don't know if they say that, I've never heard that before, but it sounds cool. A Hastelloy W wire is really good for this kind of application because same thing with 309, it's a little bit more stretchy of a material and it grabs onto things a little bit more than just say 308 or regular material where it'll just snap right off. Now I was having that problem with the 309, it just broke right off. That second one, it literally, I just clamped it on and just the force of clamping it snapped that little blob off. So got the Hastelloy W out, let's see what that does. Let's get this on the side of the table and clamp the slide hammer to it. Alright, so this is when pulling pins is not really that much fun. And when everyone says, oh, it'll just take a minute, it ain't no big deal, don't charge much for it. Lies. Honestly, sometimes they do come out real easy. Sometimes you get a stubborn one, like this one, that's being a pain. Fourth time's the charm. Fingers crossed. Damn it! Remember what I said about rinse, lather, repeat? So what we end up doing with this one, this is the 5th time trying to pull this thing out and it keeps breaking off. And the problem with it breaking off like that is it's getting deeper and deeper into that hole, so yeah. Now, like I was saying, the problem that you run into is it starts to break off, but then it starts breaking off down inside that hole. So you run the risk of burning that edge or welding that edge to the pin. And once that happens, it's pretty much a toast part. So you gotta be really, really careful, and you gotta have a nice clean tungsten to keep that edge or keep that arc to just go right onto that pin. And like I said, starts getting a little hairy after once it goes subsurface, and at some point you need to be able to say sorry, you can't get it. So I'm going to try a couple more times, and if I can't get it, that'll be the case. So just bring it back to the customer and say, hey, wouldn't come out, sorry about that. Chocolate in the bottom of the cup, not grounds. But this is the 5th time trying to get this pin out. I got one more trick up my sleeve to get this thing out, and if that doesn't work, I'm calling it. Now, the last trick I have up my sleeve is fluorescent penetrant fluid. I was going to use this for a different video to introduce it, but I guess the time's come a little bit early. What fluorescent penetrant is a crack detection fluid for NDT, or non-destructive testing. And it's a green oil that you wipe on the part, and it is very, very thin material, or it's very, very thin liquid, so it gets down into really, really small cracks. It can get into really, really fine areas. So it also works really good to remove pins, stubborn bolts, stubborn rusted on anything. So I'm letting this cool off a little bit, and I'm going to get the fluorescent penetrant out that I have and put a couple drops on there, let it sit for a little while, and give it one more pull. And if that doesn't work, I'll bring it back to the customer and say, I'm sorry, I just couldn't get it out. With this stuff, you really want to wear rubber gloves because it gets everywhere if you're not careful. So this is cooled off. Get this in here. And put a little drop on there. That's all it is. Now with that, we want to let that set for about 20-30 minutes and give it a pull. Like I said, if that doesn't work, I'm calling it. And a customer might be a little bit disappointed, but at the same time, they might be able to drill it out. I don't know. I don't want to spend any more time on it because, like I said before, I'm not making a lot of money on these, so I don't want to spend too much time on them. But while we wait, let's make another coffee. All right. Don't need to have that on anymore. We're going to go ahead and see if the fluorescent penetrant fluid helped with this pin. And if it breaks off, like I said, I'm calling it. Just is what it is. But fingers crossed that it'll actually work. So let's give it a try. I'm also going to try putting it on the table on the top and pulling it up. See if that helps. Let's see. And wouldn't you know, the fluorescent penetrant got it out. Well, that's it for this one. As you can see, it was a simple job, but it ended up being a little bit more difficult. And sometimes you got to pull out all the stops to get the job done. And that fluorescent penetrant fluid came in really handy. And the stuff's not really cheap and it's kind of hard to find, but you can find it at ndtsupply.com if you're interested in purchasing some of that. Again, not a sponsor, nothing like along those lines, just it's not something that you would commonly find. Like I don't think you can get it on Amazon or anything like that. But one thing that did come to mind is you might be wondering, why do they call it fluorescent? Well, if you use a black light, it glows. And again, if you end up using this stuff, be careful with it because it hits everywhere and you end up glowing too. So hopefully that helped and we'll catch you on the next one. Alright, I'm glad you stuck around to the end for this because I'm going to tell you my cold brew coffee recipe. And for this, I order on Amazon cold brew coffee bags, and they're about $8 or $9 for 25 bags. And then that pitcher that I use is a gallon pitcher, but I use 3 liters of water to 2 cups coarse ground coffee. You just fill that coffee bag up with the coarse ground coffee, drop it in the water, leave it in overnight, pull the coffee bag out in the morning, and you're good to go. You won't regret it. Trust me, it's really, really good.